Hello dear students, welcome back to the botany online class. So today's topic is fertilization in flowering plants. When a pollen grain reaches the stigma, a small tube is formed which is called as the pollen tube, which carries two male gametes and then enters into the ovule. So one of the male gamete here fuses with the female gamete and forms a single cell called a zygote, and this process is called as fertilization. Okay, so fertilization means it is the fusion of male and female gametes to form a diploid zygote. Clear? Double fertilization is a complex fertilization mechanism that has evolved in the flowering plants. So before going to the actual topic of fertilization, let us look into the topic how the male and the female gametes are produced and fertilized. So these male and female gametes are produced during microsporogenesis and megasporogenesis. Clear? So in a flower, it contains the male sex organ which is called as stamen, and in the stamen the tip portion is called as the anther, which contains the microsporangium. Okay, and in the microsporangium it produces the microspores. So in the microsporangium, the spore mother cell, it undergoes meiosis. As a result of this, microspores are produced, and all these microspores are referred as pollen grains. Okay, and at maturity, each pollen grain consists of two male gametes, or they are also called as sperm cells. The male gametes are also called as sperm cells. Okay, now in the female sex organ, that means in the pistil, it contains three parts, right? The tip portion is the stigma, the middle portion is the style, and the basal portion is the ovary. Okay, now within the ovary, ovules are produced, and these ovules are referred as megasporangia. Clear? And within the megasporangium, after megasporogenesis, female gamete is produced. That means within the megasporangium, the spore mother cell, it divides, or the megaspore mother cell, it divides to form a single female gamete. Understood? Now at the time of, after the formation of male and female gametes, the next process is nothing but it is the pollination. So what do you mean by pollination? It is the process of transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma of a pistil. Okay, so as soon as the formation of the male gametes, the pollen grains are transferred from the anther to the stigmatic portion of the pistil. Okay, now what happens after pollination? So when this pollen grain reaches the stigma, it absorbs the moisture from the stigmatic surface and it ruptures to form the pollen tube, which is also called as germ tube. Okay, so after pollination, this pollen grain, by absorbing the moisture content, it forms the pollen tube, and now all the contents of the pollen grain, which includes the male gametes, are transferred to this pollen tube, and this pollen tube later on reaches the ovary by passing through the style. Now after reaching the ovary, the pollen tube enters into the ovule through the micropylar region and discharges its two male gametes into the embryo sac. Clear? Now, of these two male gametes, one of the male gamete fuses with the female gamete, thus fertilization takes place. So here fertilization is also called as syngamy. Now as a result of syngamy, zygote is formed which is diploid. Okay. Now the other male gamete, it fuses with the secondary nucleus. Now how this secondary nucleus is formed? It is formed by the fusion of two polar nuclei. Correct? So this secondary nucleus is located at the center. Okay. Now the other male gamete, it fuses with the secondary nucleus and it forms the primary endosperm nucleus which is triploid. And as this process involves the fusion of three haploid nuclei, it is termed as triple fusion. And since two types of fusions, means syngamy and triple fusion, takes place in an embryo sac, it is called as double fertilization, and it is an event unique to the flowering plants. Understood? So after pollination, so this pollen tube, it enters the styla region and finally it reaches the ovary, and after reaching the ovary it enters into the ovule through the micropyle, and in the ovule it discharges its male gametes into the embryo sac. Now of these male gametes, one of the male gamete fuses with the female gamete. As a result of this, fertilization takes place, and this fertilization is also called as syngamy, and the resultant product is here zygote. Right? Now the another male gamete, it fuses with the secondary nucleus and it forms the primary endosperm nucleus which is triploid. So as this process involves the fusion of three haploid nuclei, the process is termed as triple fusion, and since two types of fusions takes place in an embryo sac, the process is called as double fertilization. Am I clear? Okay, this is the picture of double fertilization, where the pollen grain by the process called pollination, it is transferred from the anther to the stigmatic portion of the pistil, where it absorbs moisture and forms the pollen tube. Now all the contents of the pollen grain along with the male gametes are transferred to this pollen tube, and this pollen tube now reaches the ovary by passing through the style, and finally it reaches the ovule through the micropyle, and in the ovule it releases its male gametes into the embryo sac. So after releasing the male gametes, the one of the male gamete fuses with the egg cell, that means with the female gamete, to form the zygote, whereas the another male gamete fuses with the secondary nucleus and forms the endosperm, the primary endosperm nucleus. So here you can clearly observe the discharge of male nuclei and the formation of zygote and endosperm. Now as I said before, the central cell, that means the secondary nucleus, which after fusion it forms the primary endosperm nucleus, and this primary endosperm nucleus will later on develops into the endosperm, whereas the zygote, it develops into the embryo. Clear? So coming to the path of pollen tube into the ovule. So how this pollen tube is entered into the ovule. So depending upon the place of entry, there are three types: porogamy, chalazogamy and mesogamy. Porogamy means here the entry of the pollen tube into the ovule takes place through the micropyle. That means, let us consider this is the pollen tube. Now this pollen tube will enters into the ovule through the micropyle. The entry is through the micropyle. Then the process is called as porogamy. So porogamy means if the pollen tube enters into the ovule through the micropyle, then it is called as porogamy. Understood? The second type is chalazogamy. So if the pollen tube enters the ovule through the chalaza, that means this is the pollen tube. If this pollen tube enters the ovule through the chalaza, then it is called as chalazogamy. So the first entry is here through chalaza, whereas in porogamy, so if it is the ovule, this during porogamy what happens? The pollen tube enters the ovule through the micropyle itself. Whereas during chalazogamy what happens? This is the chalazal portion. The pollen tube enters the ovule through the chalaza and finally it enters into the embryo sac. Understood? So this is the second type of entry, and the third type is mesogamy. So during mesogamy, here the entry of the pollen tube into the ovule takes place through the integuments. So if the pollen tube it enters the ovule by piercing the integuments, then it is called as mesogamy. Once again I'll repeat, if the pollen tube enters into the ovule by piercing the integuments, these are the integument portion, correct? So which is nothing but the outer protective layer of the ovule. If the pollen tube enters the ovule through this integuments, then the mode of entry is called as mesogamy. In this way there are three types: porogamy, chalazogamy and mesogamy. Porogamy means if the pollen tube enters into the ovule through the micropyle, then it is called as porogamy. Chalazogamy means if the pollen tube enters into the ovule through the chalaza, then it is called as chalazogamy. And mesogamy means if the pollen tube enters the ovule through the integuments, then it is called as mesogamy. Am I clear? Now after entering into the ovule, finally it will reaches the embryo sac, and it may enters the embryo sac in one of the following routes. That means between the egg cell and the synergid, between the wall of the embryo sac and both the synergids, and between the synergids itself. Okay, that means now within the embryo sac, the ovule contains three groups of cells at the chalazal end. Say for example, this is the chalazal end and this is the micropylar end. Okay. Now in the chalazal end, it consists of antipodals, and at the center secondary nucleus. Okay, so this is the secondary nucleus. Now at the micropylar end, it consists of three groups of cells. They are single egg cell and two synergids. Clear? So now the pollen tube, it may enters the embryo sac either between the egg cell and the synergid. That means this way. Okay, so these are the synergids and this is the egg cell. So now the pollen tube, it enters the embryo sac between the egg cell and the synergid, or through the synergid itself. That means so let us consider this is the embryo sac. So the entry may be through the synergid itself, or between the wall of the embryo sac and both the synergid. That means so now this is the embryo sac and this is the wall of the embryo sac, and the entry may be between the wall of the embryo sac and the synergid, like this. Okay, So after entering into the ovule, the pollen tube, it will reaches the embryo sac. The entry may be by one of the following routes: between the egg cell and the synergid, between the wall of the embryo sac and the synergids, and through the synergids itself. Clear? And the last topic is about the significance of double fertilization. It gives a stimulus to the plant, due to which ovary develops into fruit and ovules develop into seeds. So that means after fertilization, ovary gets transformed into fruit and ovules develops into seeds, right? And the second significance is it restores the diploid condition by the fusion of haploid male and female gametes. It results in the formation of a diploid zygote, which develops into an embryo and gives rise to a new plant. It results in the formation of a triploid primary endosperm nucleus, which later on develops into endosperm in the seed. And this endosperm tissue, it provides nourishment to the developing embryo. The last significance is it brings about it brings about recombination of characters, resulting in variation among the offsprings. That means here the offsprings are formed by the fusion of male and female gametes. So it shows recombination of characters. Okay, so these are about the significance of double fertilization. Hope you all understood the class. Thank you.